I'm not the house of cards that falls down easily. I'm strong enough to handle what you throw at me.
Welcome to Mental Health News Radio. I'm your host, Kristin and Bianca. Just what are we going to discuss? The intimacy that is mental health. Let's continue to make it as comfortable as discussing brain health or heart health. This show has been on the air for several years and we have amazing co-hosts. And then we created a network of podcasters on mentalhealthnewsradionetwork.com, a place where every possible facet of mental well-being can be talked about openly. My show, after several hundred interviews, the format is this: intimate, deep, funny, touching, sometimes uncomfortable, but always vulnerable conversations with interesting people. The goal is to have you, our listening family, many of you who have become my good friends, feel as though you are listening in on private conversations. Thank you for tuning in and becoming part of this amazing journey with me, and now with our network of podcasters. Just knowing this podcast might be helping any of you realize you are not alone on this journey called being a human being makes doing this podcast worth every second.
After all we promised, we'd be cordial.
Hey listeners, I have a fantastic guest who has a new podcast. Well, it's not a new podcast. It's an existing podcast, but it's a new podcast being added to the network. I'm so excited. Bianca McCall, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
We have a lot in common, which we're going to get into some of that on this show. But first, tell my listeners a little bit about you. And, you're doing something really special in Las Vegas, but share about that if you don't mind, and then we'll talk about your podcast.
Sure. Thanks for the opportunity. My name is Bianca McCall. I am, I wear many different hats here locally in Las Vegas, Nevada, and what I do as a connector for professionals and experts with lived experience, around the world. I'm an advocate. I'm a philanthropist. I'm also a business owner. I'm a licensed therapist, intern, and I am just all things that have to do with suicide prevention and all suicide prevention initiatives. I am the first one to raise my hand and volunteer to lead in those initiatives. I am a suicide attempt survivor myself, and being in clinical practice, that has been that dark cloud that's kind of followed me around for many years, where I've been hidden in suffering in silence and surviving in silence, rather.
Yeah.
And it's not something that's easy to talk about. And I tell you, over the course of my career, which I've allowed myself to be divinely guided, in a sense. I've met some amazing people doing amazing things in their communities in the space of mental health and specifically in the space of suicide prevention. And I talked with one of our leaders here in Las Vegas, Nevada, out of the Office of Suicide Prevention. And he tells me, Bianca, you have this remarkable story. It's time for you to start telling it. And I looked at him and said, what do you mean? There goes my business. And as I alluded to before, I'm a business owner. I own a behavioral health clinic here in Las Vegas, Nevada, and June 16th will be our 9-year anniversary.
Oh my gosh, that's so cool. I didn't know it was open for that long. That is freaking amazing.
Thank you. I can't believe it has, but at the same time, it does feel like, gosh, this grind in, day in, day out has been for most of my life. So especially when you live, you're living your purpose, you're working your life's purpose and mission. Yep. Sometimes the lines are blurred between.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. you need to just come on many times, because we would have like a series arc it is to be a business owner in mental health, a female business owner, period, but also a female business owner in mental health. I mean, on and on. There's so many things. I want to ask you this because it's just burning in my head. High functioning depression
sure.
is it slips under because it's high functioning depression. I have struggled with it too, my whole life. And probably in the last, few years, if it's been so much better. I don't think I'm depressed anymore, but you never know. Winter is coming, so you never know. Now it's switched from being all the time to being seasonal, and it's usually gets better every year. I may not have it this year. Who knows? But that's rough. It's rough because you really, especially when you're a high achiever too, because you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, I know you're speaking my language for sure. High functioning depression and having to, um, being of the mindset that I have to work, 10 times harder, than some of my peers and colleagues in my community. And
Yeah.
it's because I'm facing several challenges, and I'm the hugest, proponent of looking at myself or accepting myself as just kind of this multidimensional being. I don't, I tend not to get too caught up in life experience on any one dimension, but I understand that there are things going on physically, psychologically, spiritually for me with every experience. And when I am working, just as hard to try to not only sustain, business, and learning business, it's having a healthy relationship with myself and then with others, in all of those dimensions. And so it becomes, laborious. And
Yeah.
for someone who is, self-proclaimed and pretty much, if you ask anybody who knows me, I'm a perfectionist and hard to please, and so despite me thinking, hey, it's pretty easy, you just got to feed me, and but yeah, it's a thing. I think women in business, you kind of scratch the surface of some larger issues like that. I also, I'm an African American woman. I identify as a lesbian woman. I'm kind of like your modern day social misfit, and so I'm constantly working hard to redefine a lot of times for others, what it means to be all of those things and
When
how
you're
to
a person who can check multiple boxes.
yeah, and be appreciated for that uniqueness,
Right.
and it's a constant battle, and a lot of times the hardest part of the battle is within myself,
Oh, yeah.
accepting that falling short of my grandiose goal isn't failure, and appreciating what we would consider even the smaller successes.
Oh my gosh, preach. Okay. Because I have had to learn. It's been such a trip. It's been such a great thing for me to do my own podcast. And then, you heard my whole story, and my listeners sure as heck have heard it way too many times, but how the network came to be. It was not planned. It was not on any 5-year plan, but it's made me so many things. That's a whole other show to talk about what it's done for my life. But I'd say one of the biggest things that it's helped me with in business is it's helped me completely eradicate perfectionism, not to the point where just everything's a sloppy mess. It's just because I would never allow that to happen, obviously, but I've had to let go of so much. I mean, Dan Cropper, love him. Got to give a shout out to him. Has worked with me for years. He does all the web design stuff. And he's said, Kristin, you used to I used to sit and think, is she literally looking at her website 24 hours a day for problems? Like what? Because every little, there's a typo. And now I'm like, you know what? I have 80 podcasts and show notes are getting automatically pulled over because I don't have time. I used to hand type everything. Ridiculous. And if people spell stuff wrong, they spell stuff wrong. And I have the time nor the interest to fix that stuff. And the fact that I am not concerned about this how I used to be is huge.
Yeah. I'm looking up to you as you speak.
It's huge. So, it's been, I don't know. I have this motto about if a bear, poops in the woods and I don't see it, what do I care? And that's kind of, you would think that it goes against all the things that you learn about mental health, about keeping track of things, about whatever. But anyway, it works for me to be like, I didn't see it happen, so it didn't happen.
Sure, sure. Well, and I think that that's kind of a centerpiece of how we manage, our mental health, being, business owners and in the mental health space.
Yeah.
Letting go is like the holy grail,
Yeah.
of skill sets. Knowing when to end a relationship, that you're speaking to kind of the mantras of life.
Right.
um,
Right.
and for me, I definitely think that relates to how I survive and manage the depression, the anxieties, some of the other factors that in my journey has presented this, these thoughts of not wanting to be here, or not wanting to experience those uncomfortable feelings and feelings of failure.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh, the crushing. Like you're already, that's the big thing too. People would say, they say this, I do so many shows on autism too, and I host a lot on one of our autism shows, but I really relate to my friends and anyone who has autism, because people think that they have no feelings, they're robots, or they're out of control or whatever. And the reality is there is so much going on internally, and it's taking there's a tsunami, but you don't know it or see it. And I relate to that completely. And what I think is interesting is when people see that you're that way, they can put a label on you that you're uncaring or that you're whatever. And it's like, you have no idea what's going on inside me.
Yeah, yeah. Well, interesting enough too, with that example or analogy, with someone who is experiencing, the autistic spectrum, you'll notice that there is that tsunami going on inside. But ultimately, what is an effective kind of modality to calm someone down?
Right.
It's physical touch, it's connectivity, and I don't think that
Right.
changes. If you change the scope of that, and you're looking at overall, again, mental health, our on any life experience, on any one of those aforementioned dimensions, connectivity, that physical connection, that spiritual connection, psychological connection in how we define meaning, so important to all of us.
Oh my gosh, hugely important. And what a time right now. I've been given the date on show. So it's May 27th, 2020. So we're starting to open up the United States is starting, whether that's good or not, that's another show, but we're starting to open up after COVID or during COVID. And there's been this long period of time where physical touch is like, no, 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 social distance, all that. And it's been really very difficult, very challenging. Haven't even begun to scratch the surface of the trauma, PTSD, the mental health issues that are coming from this, that are here already from this. But, it's been really rough for people. For me, I'm like, yeah, let's keep social distancing. I like it.
Right. This is great. Easy on the freeway. Yeah.
Yes.
I've been talking a lot about this, even on my podcast shows, and the whole term social distancing, it really just kind of scares me. It makes my stomach drop, especially when we're talking about mental health and in the space of suicide prevention. Isolation, anything, distancing, anything, are usually the key drivers to those crises, those experiences of crises. And so, I tend to cringe, anytime, these discussions come up about what we're doing in order to perceive that we are well and safe.
Right.
But at the same time, I can't be angry because, for some of us, and certainly me throughout this time of where we've been stayed at home, I've been more social than I was before, especially as a business owner. I found plenty of things to do with my time and lost several days, several hours. And, now we've got scheduled family group chats, and we're checking in, with my workforce. I'm checking in with my family members. I'm checking in with my friends and making such a purposeful effort to connect and maintain those connections. This is conversely, been a time where I think I've been the healthiest, across the board.
I know. Isn't that a trip? I mean, I see, you're in this field, so you see all sides of everything to the point that it's freaking exhausting, quite frankly. However, it's that I've had that same experience. I've had more rich connections that, during this than I did before. So I'm kind of like, can we move forward from this? Let's not go backwards at all. Let's move forward into a new reality and then work out the kinks as we go there. Because not everything about this has been horrible.
Sure. I think one thing that, is yet to be seen is really the effects of something like this, the effects of distancing. I don't think that we have been able to make those connections in terms of, a true measurement of how people are feeling, relating. We certainly haven't gotten in any of the statistics from, how many incidents of crises people, had experienced during this time. But I share the same sentiment as you just expressed. I'm hopeful. I'm confident in communities across the world to that we were paying attention, during this time, that there's an opportunity to learn, to grow, and to create a new normal, to where there's better supports, there's better supports for everyone, and looking at how marginalized communities survived, quarantine and coronavirus. I mean, there's so many opportunities, to get better.
Absolutely. Oh yeah. And we haven't even scratched the surface. I don't like those words too, social distancing, when that is just absolutely the opposite of what we talk about when we're talking about things like suicidal ideation. I mean, yeah, we're supposed to watch out when people isolate.
Sure.
I mean, but.
Well, I think one benefit with labeling it as physical distancing, it brings us a little bit closer to this convergence of ideas that are physical and are psychological. There's some parallels there, and that brings us to this position or this stage where we could really give a good attack against things like stigma. How mental health is highly stigmatized, how suicide is highly stigmatized, and we could present the argument now, pretty clearly, that just the same as we have to attention ourselves to our physical health, and there's maintenance and preparation and all these things. It's the same. Same goes for psychological health, for mental health.
Absolutely. Tell us about speaking of mental health, tell us about your podcast, the name of it, what inspired you to do it, the kind of shows you've had already.
Sure. So my podcast is called the UNNI Podcast. And the first thing that everybody does when I mention the podcast is they ask me, well, what does UNNI mean? And it's spelled UNNI. And the way that name came to me is actually, I just describe everything as it's divine intervention, divine timing, divine guidance. And that's exactly how this happened. I had a team, marketing team, and we were having a whiteboarding session, brainstorming some ideas for, what we wanted the focus to be. Of course, it was going to be in suicide prevention, but we wanted a name that was a little less, offensive to most.
Right.
And we came up with all these ideas, and in classic, Bianca fashion, After hours and hours of doing this, I wake up in the middle of the night. I head to the bathroom, one eye open, squinting open, and I just thought, UNNI, we're gonna call it UNNI. The prefix just kept popping up in all the ways that I wanted to be relatable with this podcast. I thought of words like unity, universality, universal intelligence, a universal language that is compassionate, towards our survivors, our lost survivors and attempt survivors, and really an opportunity to empower those folks to become the leaders in our communities. Because in the space of suicide prevention, it's the same as some other inclusive populations or cultures. When we talk about first responders, an example, first responders are talking or more likely to talk to other first responders about their life experiences.
Yeah.
There's this brethren and fraternity that surrounds that particular group, and there's not a whole lot that kind of quote unquote an outsider will get out of somebody in law enforcement, or firefighter, EMT. It's the same for all of these subcultures. Our peer groups, we've seen some of the greatest outcomes come from peer supports and peer oriented treatments, because somebody with lived experience that is surviving creates this space to be able to help others through that darkness or through that time. And so that's really the purpose of the UNNI podcast is I wanted to create a beacon for lost survivors and for attempt survivors to come to, that are interested in learning how to safely tell their story, to be responsible in telling their stories, so that we can create this emerging leadership group in the space of suicide prevention and look to survivors as being the experts. With me being with me being a survivor as well as a clinical practitioner, I've kind of toted this tightrope or this tight line for so many years. And as a clinician, I do feel like I'm able to have an impact. I'm able to, via my credentials, I'm able to connect with people and process with people. But I was just looking for something more, something that would have a greater impact and a greater reach. And the podcast, it just became that platform for me. I got to step outside of my office, and get on the radio and connect with people all over the world.
I tell everybody, when you get your microphone, that is the truth stick. And it's whatever you believe or don't believe about spirituality, doesn't matter. It's going to change your life. It's going to supercharge your growth regardless of what you believe in.
Absolutely. And it's a whole lot of fun too, Kristin.
Yeah, exactly.
All of that aside, I'm truly fulfilled. I have not been this excited to go to quote unquote work in a long time. And I love people. I love connecting with people. I love learning. And what better way than to connect, in far distances and different cultures, and do it with, there's that respect and that desire to, submerge into somebody else's culture and to learn their journey. But there's also this kind of respectful, I guess, distance, if we want to play on words, that gives some autonomy, it gives some space that's safe, and we're able to be kind of authentic, It's an amazing process. And I'm so happy. I'm so open, in this process.
It's so funny because I started doing mine many years ago, and in the internet verse, I started, ancient times, because we're talking 8 years ago, and internet years like 30 days now. It used to be 90 days, but I've been doing this since the Stone Age, basically.
Right.
And it's been so weird to see it evolve because, when I started doing it, it was like, what's a podcast? That will never last. Blockbuster video will never go out of business. It was just like, it was this crazy thing. And now and then came, I got into over the top television and having your own channel, and my podcast was streaming on an OTT channel, and now we're doing some film stuff. And I don't know, I've just watched this progression, and I've had people say, oh yeah, but just listening to you need to be on TV, or you need to be on YouTube, you need to be on film, because it's fine. I haven't actually had a very, very, very well-known film producer who I love, and he listens to my show. Sorry, dude, I'm calling you out, but not by name. He was talking to me and he was like, well, podcasts that's great that you have this network, but that's not film. And I was like, dude, do you have any idea? Like, this is a big deal. It's not going away. And yes, just audio gives people a very different experience than watching someone talking. It's just different. They're different. There's an intimacy there that people are craving that clearly ain't going away.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, you see it in kind of the rise in utility for audiobooks, right? And I'm another one that loves audiobooks. You're absolutely right. What you hear, there is a higher level of intimacy. There's this pause that allows you to construct and be creative, in interpretations and apply it to your own realities. Because what we're seeing on TV and on the internet, there's so many messages, right, that you're spending most of your energy and time, your brain capacity is deciphering through all of these messages. But with something, that's auditory, there's this smooth kind of relationship, that occurs.
And there's a safety. That's why it fits with mental health. It was like what you were just talking about. It fits in this medium so well. I tell podcasters when they're like, yeah, but I also want to be filmed doing my show and put that on YouTube. And I'm like, that's fine. If you want to do that, go for it. But I give them the same speech every time. You will miss out on cues by having, like, if you and I were on camera right now, there are things that we would relax into because we can see each other that the listener then doesn't get to be privy to, and it messes with your show.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I'll share something with you. So I'm also a retired athlete. I played women's basketball for most of my life. I played competitively in college, also on the semi-professional and professional stages as well. And so I'm used to, and when I tell my story, I always give the analogy of there's center stage Bianca and backstage Bianca. And so I'm used to kind of that moment of silence and preparation to go out and be on center stage. But also, there's that transition coming off of center stage where you're going back, you're going backstage and you kind of have this, reflective or reflection period. And a part of that process for any one person, there's a lot of internal talk that goes along, in those transitions. And podcasting and radio and these audio platforms, it's very much like that. It's like putting a speaker to my internal talk.
Yes.
So it's so much fun in that space. And I'll share something else with you as you're talking about the evolution of this platform and voices on this platform. When I was a kid, I used to go into my garage. My parents got me a one of those karaoke machines, gold-plated mics, and playing basketball. I played AAU basketball. I traveled around the country and the world with my teammates. And what I would do at the culmination of each season is I would go into the garage to finish out the summer, and I would make them all tapes of remixes to songs, or just my voice, kind of having my own show and things like that. And so when I told my parents that I'm starting a podcast, they were not shocked. They were not surprised. but just evolution, it's I'm coming from a place where, I had the microphones, I was recording my voice and getting to know myself, finding that identity through those tapes. And that's how I connected with others, and to come full circle now, to be able to do this on a platform, as esteemed as the Mental Health News Radio Network, and just being able to reach so many people. I mean, gosh, this is, I feel like a rock star,
Well, you are, period. Without
Thank
any
you.
of this, that, and boy, does it take a long time to start like acknowledging that and being okay acknowledging that. But yeah, this does help, put you in another wider, cast a wider net. This is what I'm ineloquently trying to say. But you know what I was thinking? This is so funny. I had a whole dialogue. I'm listening to you in one ear and I'm having a dialogue in my head in the other, a memory of, and I've just admitted that I was not fully paying attention, even though I heard everything you said. Listeners, we do it all the time. It's called being a human being. It's okay. So here's what I was thinking. Oh my God. I used to sit with a cassette tape recorder because, I'm 50, and I would act out these shows. I would act out voices. It was all about voice. And we would do these little comedy routines and then listen to them later, and this is like when I'm 8, and we would laugh hysterically over them. And I never put the connection together. Maybe that's why I love this too. I never got into the camera thing, which I'm doing now, and it's fine, but I loved doing, comedy stuff, recording my voice with a friend, doing weird, crazy stuff that only 8-year-olds think is funny. But I loved doing that. And now I do it as an adult. Hey.
Yeah, no, it's just so fun to return to just kind of that true self,
Yeah.
And yeah, like we were saying, everything relates to just being able to connect with people, be able to connect on a premise of just joy and authenticity. And yeah, I mean, it's a remarkable process, and just to kind of give praise to what you've been able to do and build with, MHNR network. This is just such a fun playground, for folks like I.
It's the land of misfit toys is what this network is. We just all the misfit toys, are on the same island.
Yeah.
And it's not exclusive. Anybody can join, and everybody, well, maybe 2% of the people out there don't feel like a misfit, but everybody else does. Even people that you look at and from the outside you go, my God, they really just have it all together. I mean, I know some of those people. I know some very well-known people that everybody, massive amounts, millions of people think, boy, they really have it all together. Look at them. They got fame. They got fortune. They got the, you know what? They feel like they're misfit toys too.
Yeah.
They don't have it all together. They don't. Nobody does. When you have it all together? When you're dead.
Right. Well, yeah. And when I think about just kind of my experience of anxiety and depression, a lot of times it's rooted in this fear, that I am a misfit, that I am sticking out kind of like a sore thumb, and I've had experiences that have reinforced this fear, where I've been misunderstood because of my outward appearance, and how I mentioned that I represent kind of minority of minorities in a lot of circumstances.
Right.
And through exercises like learning to tell my story, even being, because I think there's a lot of courage that goes into having a podcast and just speaking your mind, speaking your truth.
Yeah.
These types of activities have allowed me to now step outside and say, and rather than be anxious, but be excited and say, who am I going to piss off today?
And listen, there's this whole, like, I have 8 years of me and my wherever I was at that time. And I went through a long period of cringing, going, oh my God, I did those shows and that was my opinion about this then, or I was so immature or clueless, obtuse, and also, amazingly open, whatever, the gamut of things. And it's all out there for anybody to hear, and out of order. So somebody could go and hear things that I did, where I was at 8 years ago, and think that it's today and be like, wow, she's really immature, like wherever they're hearing it at the moment. And I've had to let it go, because you know what? I'm not taking them down. And the reason why that's important is most people don't record their lives that way or their progress that way. And so, so the people that do, we do have moments where you do go, oh shit.
Yeah. Whoops. Yeah.
Wow. I sounded whatever, but I don't know. It's been great. I just watched myself on film, and I was the first time in my entire life I've been able to be objective watching myself.
Yeah.
Boy, that takes a lot of confidence in yourself and peace to be able to go, okay, yeah, I definitely need to stop shaking my head. There's my double chin, whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, I sound dumb when I do that, and I think I'm being charming. I mean, there's just so many, there's so many things but to do it without eviscerating yourself, that's the key,
Yeah. And it just goes back to what you said before, the art of letting go of all of that. Listen, I'm looking up to you right now, as you're talking about your experiences with film. I'm working on a documentary myself. For state of Nevada each year, our coroner's office and via the Child Death Review Board, they allocate some funds to local providers that are committed to doing some initiatives to prevent child death. And our youth suicide rates have increased quite a bit over the last few years. We saw a 90% increase in youth suicide rates for Nevada, and largely in Southern Nevada. We were seeing these cases. And so I decided that I was going to apply, for some funds to do a project. And in past years, it's traditionally, we'll create some brochures, we'll get some kind of merch and swag and pass it out for awareness. And this year I said, nobody's reading, nobody's wearing bracelets. Let's do a documentary.
Yes.
So yeah, it was an ambitious task to try to pull in. Yeah.
Is it out yet?
It's not out yet. We're actually in the production phases now. I
might have a distributor for you. I want to, if you don't already have one, or if you're not exclusive, if you can be on other distribution points. We're working with, and sorry, listeners, you're having to hear this business discussion, but we're working with Chicken Soup for the Soul Entertainment, and they have like Ashton Kutcher's company, A+ is part of the network, Truly, Sony Crackle, Screen Media. I mean, it's a huge platform, and they're always like, hey, Kristin, do you have any film content we could use that's uplifting and all that? And so I'm listening to you talk, and I'm like, hey, I can give them another one. If you could do that, that would be cool. I can make the connection.
No, that's awesome. This is an independent project at this time. I've just been reaching out to, the emerging leaders in Nevada. I want to highlight some of the awesome things they're doing here. But yeah, no, thank you. This has been an experience, again, challenging, because we're talking about film and things like that. And so some of the same thoughts and concerns that you shared, I'm definitely experiencing now. And and it's kind of one of those things like, well, you think you could do a podcast, you think you could be on air, try being in front of the camera and you're hot, you're sweating, you're lost for words.
Or you're on a live news show. I learned so much. You're on a live news show, and and the camera is on you, and you have to violently cough.
Oh yeah.
There is no cut, because I've done those too. No, it's coming, and you can't do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like probably your time as an athlete and being out there and you got to just plow through pain or whatever is something akin to that. But I'm telling you, I've been like I'm holding in my
Yeah. I, as an athlete, I always call myself a gamer or a curtain caller because, as soon as we start the game, as soon as the curtain calls, I black out, to be honest. And I just play. Yeah, I'm in a zone. And so, and it's like that for me in all the ways that, I feel I'm talented or I'm extremely prepared. But to be in front of the camera, that's something that I'm definitely working on, to make that one of my talents, to prepare myself for that, next level of a platform. Because I'm doing the same things. I was just filming this last weekend, some segments up in Utah, and I've had these terrible allergies for the last couple of weeks. It's been windy as all heck, in Vegas and especially out in the mountains in Utah. And I'm passionate, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh boy, my nose is going to start to run.
Phlegm, and it needs to come out now. Yeah.
And I'm trying to give, nonverbal signals to the videographer, and like, yeah, we may need to pause. We may need to pause. I may need some water.
Oh, I have looked at the camera. And it's so important who you work with too, because I have had the worst experiences and now I've had the best experience. Like it couldn't have been more different. And now I realize, I needed to have 2 horror show experiences to appreciate how, good it is now. Cause I have had directors in my ear going, this isn't exciting enough. And I'm like, we're talking about sex trafficking. What is it you want me to make more like, just the most ridiculous stuff. And then looking at the playbacks and going of me telling a director, we have to stop or we have to cut or whatever. I'm waving my arms and I'm like, oh man, if they use that footage, I look like I'm constipated and have some sort of seizure happening. Please don't cut to that. Like you give so much more. Voice is voice. Okay. That's one place. But when it's you and you're also being seen, the amount of trust that actors have to give to the people that are filming them, I have so much more respect for.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and you would just assume they have to be in a zone, and
they aren't
like,
always.
yeah. Well, yeah. And I mean, from what because I used to, be very, I'd say I used to be very dramatic. I was just going to tell you that lie because I still am very dramatic. But, growing up, I was always in theater and things like that. And that zone, is completely taking yourself out of your body, and
Right.
entering into another's, and being that voice to amplify another's experience and journey. And, it's not that much different, doing radio podcasts. And it's not that much different from, being a therapist and sitting across from the couch. There's always this process, where you're reflecting empathy and you are opening yourself to be able to see somebody else's experience, to be able to see the world through another lens. And that's an art form, that's a skill that I think transcends film. And it's actually, kind of just speaking to my main point and purpose. It's what's needed in order to, seek a cure for something like suicide.
Yeah. Yes. Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. Man, we could do 12 shows. So
yeah. Sold. Deal.
Easily. Tell for today, because you'll be back. Tell our listeners. Well, of course, you could find her show, the UNNI Podcast, on Mental Health News Radio Network. But and iTunes and everywhere else, but tell our listeners where they can find out more about you.
Sure. So I'm on LinkedIn under my name, Bianca McCall. It's spelled Bianca. Last name is Mccall. I'm also on all the major social sites. My handle is for the UNNI Podcast. Also through my behavioral health agency, Desert Rose Counseling Group. You can go to www.desertroselv.com. And I mean, hey, I'm in so many different communities, active, retired in a lot of positions. If you just Google my name, I think you'll have some fun stuff that pops up. But yeah, I thank you so much, Kristin, for having me on the show. I am incredibly grateful, even to just be on the Mental Health News Radio Network. I'm having a blast, and I'm so grateful. Thank you.
Oh, it's an honor. And listeners, please tune in to her show. There are already several episodes up. It's a relatively new show, but she's already busting records with the number of downloads and listens. So please tune into her show. And as always, thank you for tuning in to another episode of Mental Health News Radio. Hi, listeners. I'll make it quick. These are some really cool places that give discounts and other cool things for listeners of Mental Health News Radio Network. If you want to get amazing help with healing from narcissistic abuse, go to healfromanarcissist.com. If you want CBD products that are the best of the best, I use them myself, go to proze.com and use the code mentalhealth20, mentalhealth20. If you want to get daily perk ups that help retrain your brain to think more positively, go to perkupdaily.com. And also, just because this one's fun, snarkycandles.com. I guarantee you'll love them. Snarky with a Y, SNARKY, candles.com. And don't forget, if you want to hear all the shows on the network about first responders, you can go to firstrespondermentalhealthnetwork.com, and all of our shows that focus on narcissistic abuse, narcissisticabusehealingnetwork.com. Thanks for listening, and back to the show.
Sometimes I'm passive aggressive, but never without good intentions. I heat up and act on my emotions.
Thanks so much for listening to Mental Health News Radio. Our podcast can be found on iTunes, Stitcher, and hundreds of other podcast apps, or you can visit our website at mentalhealthnewsradio.com. If you have a question or would like to be a guest, become a podcaster on our network, or join the amazing organizations that help keep us on the air, please email us at info@mhnrnetwork.com. Get ready for that special goodbye from our resident therapy dog, Miles, and a special thanks to Emily Sohn for letting us use her incredible song, Cordial, for our podcast music. Listen to the full song on SoundCloud at emily.sonne.
Don't be surprised when I don't hate on you. After all, we promised we'd be cordial. Sometimes in you I can fight it, but I'm opposing.
Good boy.